Jake Browning, one of the top 3 ads as we get ready to look at the roster trends going into Week 14. Ezekiel Elliott also in there. And there's the rookie in Chicago, Roschon Johnson. These guys were the 3 most added players in CBS Sports Fantasy Leagues. And no surprise with Jake Browning, I guess. 32 of 37, 354 yards, a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown. The dude was amazing. Low ADOT, though, kind of a red flashing sign that there could be trouble. We'll talk about Ezekiel Elliott right now. Dave Richard, along with the Deacon of Dynasty, Heath Cummings, to go over your ads and drops both for this week and for maybe moving forward. So let's start with Ezekiel Elliott, Heath. Number 1 added running back, a must start in fantasy week 14. My playoffs are on the line. I'm turning to Ezekiel Elliott. Explain it for everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to add both Zeke and Roschon Johnson, but for this week, Elliott is the best available starter on the waiver wire. I'm not sure I'm going to go all the way to say he's a must start, but he is ranked inside of my top 20. And the key is really volume. We saw with Ramondre Stevenson going down in week 13, Elliott, 21 touches, caught 4 passes. We've seen this Patriots offense really focus heavily in the passing game on the running backs, not just this year, but for most of the last decade. And so I do think without Stevenson this week, you're going to see a 20 to 25 touch game for Elliott. Might be even better than that because I'm not sure how many points they're going to be in this game. The Patriots aren't going to fall behind. He will be a start-worthy player, if not a must-start player.
I agree that he is a start-worthy player. I think that he's absolutely in line for the 15 to 20 touches that you're talking about. Don't want to get too excited about him because what have we known him for? Scoring touchdowns? Will the Patriots score a touchdown? It seems like those are really hard for them to come by. I want to spin it forward at the running back position. Talk about Kenneth Gainwell of the Philadelphia Eagles. Available still in a ton of CBS Sports leagues. Yes, I'd rather have Ezekiel Elliott. Yes, I'd rather have Roschon Johnson. Roschon, by the way, could be the lead back for Chicago as soon as this week. But I want to have Kenneth Gainwell on my bench. Not just to back up a 1B type of a player behind DeAndre Swift. And he could be a part of Philly's ground game if they decide to get that part of their offense going again. And this is the playoff push time for Philadelphia. They're locked in. They're going to make the playoffs. But when push comes to shove, I think Kenneth Gainwell is going to get some serious opportunities. We know that he can catch the football as well. Kenneth Gainwell is somebody that I want to have on my bench. The best type of lottery ticket. Imagine a world, if DeAndre Swift misses time, what Kenneth Gainwell's upside should be. It would be huge. All right, the quarterback of the moment is Jake Browning for the Cincinnati Bengals, Heath. Are we at the point now where you'd consider starting him if you lost Trevor Lawrence, if you lost Joe Burrow? You're one of those quarterback needy fantasy managers?
Yeah, I think the 2 top streamers this week are facing each other, Gardner Minshew and Jake Browning. I'm not so sure that Browning won't be better. Listen, Minshew was already rostered in more than half of leagues. That's why Browning is the most added quarterback. But you look what he did against Jacksonville. You mentioned the counting stats. Completed more than 80% of his passes, averaged 9.6 yards per attempt. To put 9.6 yards per attempt in context, that's what the current MVP frontrunner Brock Purdy is averaging for the season. I don't think it's actually all that real. I still think that this offense is going to struggle at times, but the Colts have played a type of football that has produced a lot of fantasy points, both for their players and for their opponents. They run a lot of plays. They give up a lot of plays to opponents. So I do think that Browning could be a borderline top 12 starter along with Minshew this week.
I'm nervous to trust it just because we saw one game with him being terrible and then the one game against Jacksonville. I think the Jacksonville defense had a lot to do with Jake Browning having a big-time stat line. And I'm surprised that Jameis Winston wasn't added in more leagues because I think Jameis Winston, it's a name we know. He's been around the NFL for a long time. Looks like he's going to be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Should we be excited about Jameis Winston? I'm nervous about Jameis Winston. I actually have to make a choice between Jameis Winston and Jake Browning in one of my leagues. I'm serious. Heath knows this league that we're in. I'm in quarterback trouble. These are the decisions that I'm forced with. So what are the reasons for Jameis Winston? Well, it's obviously the big arm. It's obviously the upside of throwing to Chris Olave. What's the downside to Jameis Winston? Well, this week specifically, he might not have to throw much. They're taking on the Panthers. Quarterbacks against Carolina are averaging under 30 pass attempts per game. It's actually the second lowest mark among all defenses in the National Football League. And this coaching staff, Derek Carr was playing poorly earlier this year. They were reluctant to move Carr out of the way for Winston. I think they wanted to keep Carr in because they're nervous about Winston. And I thought about why that might be the case. look no further than 2022. He made his first 3 starts for the Saints, and one of the games was good. He had 5 interceptions in the next 2 with 2 touchdowns. Only 1 game out of the 3 with 20-plus fantasy points. I would be nervous to start Jameis Winston this week. Let's move to wide receivers. Jonathan Mingo kind of put up numbers that everybody thought that Adam Thielen would put up for the Panthers. Are you digging it, Heath? Do you think this is somebody who could be picked up right now and maybe used as a spot starter in full PPR?
Absolutely. Now, I think it is a PPR only discussion. We've seen for a majority of this season what Adam Thielen's been able to do, and it's not been because of any great efficiency. It's been because he has double-digit targets almost every week. Well, they fire the coaching staff, and the very next week, now it's Jonathan Mingo seeing those double-digit targets with 10 targets in week 13, and it's actually his 4th consecutive week with at least 6 targets, his 2nd week in a row with double-digit PPR fantasy points. I wouldn't be all that surprised if we see Mingo move into that wide receiver 3 range in the fantasy playoffs, earning 10 to 12 targets a week. We know this Panthers team is going to be playing from behind. They're going to have to throw the ball 40 times per game, and there's really not much motivation to throw 10 or 15 of those passes to a 33-year-old Adam Thielen when you're not even playing for draft position.
And look right there on the screen, the percentage rostered was 20%. That means he's out there in 4 out of every 5 leagues on CBSSports.com. Easy PPR stash. But I got a guy that I think I like a little bit better in Josh Palmer of the LA Chargers. Not as widely available as Jonathan Mingo, but Heath, we've seen this Chargers offense kind of collapse over the last 4 or 5 games, really since Josh Palmer's been out. And now it looks like he's coming back. There's a report from NFL Network that he's been designated to return off of IR. In the 4 games before he got hurt, 16, 10, 10, and 18 PPR points. That's a good floor with great upside. Even had 12 non-PPR points in 2 of those 4 games. And in the 5 games he's missed, the Chargers have gotten 15 or more PPR points out of only 1 wide receiver. You know who it is. It's Keenan Allen. So no one else was really able to step up. Might it be that Josh Palmer could be the key to the Chargers offense getting back on track because Quentin Johnston's made mistakes, Jalen Guyton hasn't stepped up, the tight ends are hit or miss. I wish there was a Josh Palmer that could come back to their offensive line and help block to protect Justin Herbert and make lanes for Austin Eckler. But as far as the passing game goes, I think Josh Palmer is someone that fantasy managers can go and get and maybe use him as a number 3 option in an offense that's going to throw the ball a lot and has a really good quarterback in Justin Herbert. Last but not least, tight ends. Isaiah Likely didn't play last week. Week before, 8 PPR points. Looks like he's the main tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. Is he a start this week, Heath?
He's not a start for me. He's a top 20 tight end only because I'm intrigued by the upside that he showed us last year. Not even what he's done this year, because this year has been completely and totally uninspiring. There's basically been 3 games that Mark Andrews missed or left early enough that likely should have put up good numbers. That 8-point performance you mentioned, the best outing he's had. The other 2, I think he combined for a total of 2 PPR fantasy points. It's been an absolute disaster. This is not the same offense that we saw last year when Likely just stepped right into Andrews' shoes and performed like a must-start tight end. I don't believe the tight end bucket of targets actually exists the same in this offense as long as Mark Andrews is not there. But I do recognize the upside. I do know Lamar Jackson's history with the tight end position, and so I'd like to add Likely, put him on my roster. I just don't think it's likely he's going to give you what he did last year.
I see what you did there. And you know what? I've got him ranked 9th. I think that might be a little too high. I might be a little too excited about Isaiah Likely, but he's in that group of tight ends that feels like, okay, I'd be satisfied if they gave me 8 or 9 PPR points, but he's got the upside to get you maybe 10 or 11. He doesn't have huge upside. I do like Likely better than the tight end that I would stash. Let's say I can't get my hands on Isaiah Likely. He's already rostered in 44% of CBS Sports leagues. Who would I turn to? I would speculate on Chig Okonkwo of the Tennessee Titans. Here's what I've noticed over the last couple of games. He's been tied for 1st or 2nd in targets for Tennessee in those games, at least 8.5 PPR points in each of those games. No double-digit PPR points. There is no crazy high upside for Okonkwo like there might be theoretically for Isaiah Likely. But you think about this Titans offense, and I don't know how many games they have left where they're going to be able to say, Derrick Henry, lead us to victory, or Derrick Henry, lead us to overtime where we'll lose to Indianapolis. It's going to be a situation where they're playing from behind, and Will Levis is going to have to throw, and it looks like Okonkwo is getting more and more involved. And we know that he was one of the most efficient pass catchers. Forget about tight ends, pass catchers last season when he was on the field getting regular playing time with the Tennessee Titans. So just a name to keep in mind, Chig Okonkwo, a deep tight end type of stash in PPR leagues. We love going over all these players for our roster trends, helping you make your lineups as strong as possible for the playoff push that's coming. And we do it not only here on CBS Sports HQ, but also on our podcast. Our Fantasy Football Today podcast will have game-by-game start-sit breakdowns 2 days in a row. Thursday's podcast, Friday's podcast. It is the only place for you to wire in to get lineup help so that you are ready to win in Week 14.